Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books author reading series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller like me, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
Chapter 1. I strain to listen for boots on the pavement, stomping, marching. But there's nothing. Only the familiar chirp of the crickets and the occasional fading rumble of a car in the distance, and a rustle so faint I can't tell if it's the wind or the anxious huff of my breath. But everywhere it's the same as it's always been. The perfectly manicured lawn of Center Square, the gazebo's twinkling fairy lights, the yellow beams from the porch lamps at every door. In the distance, I see a funnel of smoke rising in the air. Most of the town is at the book burning, so I should be safe, or at least safer. I don't measure time by the old calendar anymore. I don't look at the date. There's only then and now. There's only what we once were and what we have become. 2.5 years since the election, 2 years since the Nazis marched on D.C., 18 months since the Muslim ban, 1 year since our answers on the census landed us on the registry, 9 months since the first book burning, 6 months since the exclusion laws were enacted, 5 months since the Attorney General argued that Korematsu v. United States established precedent for relocation of citizens during times of war, 3 months since they started firing Muslims from public sector jobs, 2 months since a virulent Islamophobe was sworn in as Secretary of War, a cabinet position that hasn't existed since World War II. 1 month since the President of the United States gave a televised speech to Congress declaring that, quote, Muslims are a threat to America. I thought our little liberal college town would fight it longer, hold out. Some did. But you'd be surprised how quickly armed military personnel and pepper spray shut down the well-meaning protest of liberals in small, leafy towns.
Thank you for reading from that. So when I first started the book, I was like, wow, this is starting out really tense. Like, maybe it'll lighten up for parts. It doesn't lighten up in the best way, because that makes it more real.
Yeah, I don't read the books after I've done, so I haven't read it. I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds like kind of scary right now.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was the feeling for about 400 pages.
Okay,
so thank you.
Mission accomplished.
So I don't want to start off getting too far off track, but when I was reading it, and then I went back and looked at sort of like how it was described and how people were classifying it. So there was this viral tweet last year from the filmmaker Jordan Peele, the brilliant Jordan Peele, and he just said, Get Out, his movie, is a documentary, which spoke to like the very real racial trauma experienced by Black people in this country, which was what his movie was about. So I've seen Internment described as a dystopian, which sort of like took me aback.
Yeah, I don't
after
describe
I read
it that way, actually.
Yeah, so how do you describe it?
I describe it as a contemporary novel set 15 minutes into America's future. And so I know people want to put that dystopia thing on it, and I'm like, well, the dystopia is now, folks, so it's now.
Yeah, that's how I read it.
I mean, I call it 15 minutes in the future, but like as I was writing, I was like, oh, it's like 14 minutes now, now 12, now 7. Now 4.
Yeah, it felt really current, and I think I saw it on a list of like dystopian novels like this week or last week or something.
I saw it also on a science fiction list, and I was like, oh. I was like, okay, I'm a science fiction writer.
Right, yeah, you didn't even know.
Yeah, I didn't know. Amazing.
All right. So you have a pretty lengthy resources section in the back of the book, and I'm like a sort of former, not comfortable calling myself a journalist, so I really appreciated seeing all the research that went into it. And I'm curious if you could talk about some of the research you did, and then I'm also curious if you found certain types of research more useful to you in the book, whether it was talking to people or reading.
So I did a lot of research on, obviously, Japanese-American internment, and also kind of present-day internments that we're having, like looking at the Muslims in China and refugee camps for like Syrian refugees and that kind of thing. And I also looked a lot at what was happening in Germany between 1933 and 1935, like the Weimar Republic and some of the early things that were happening, because it wasn't like, it's like sort of the pre-Nazi Germany, but with the election of Adolf Hitler. And I looked carefully at sort of the slow deterioration of the civil rights of the Jewish people and how they were stripped away. And, it's sort of like, it made me really think a lot of like, that whole frog in like the boiling pot of water metaphor. It's like if there's a boiling pot of water and the frog jumps in, he's going to jump out immediately because he's going to be like, oh my God, it's boiling. But if he's just in there, then he slowly acclimates till he's dead. And so I don't know, that's kind of what I was thinking as I was reading all those things. And I also was able to speak to, I had one of my early readers was a Japanese American woman who was in an internment camp as a child. And I also spoke with her daughter at length, sort of, not, I guess, interviewing, but maybe more like sort of casual conversation about a lot of things. And, even though it's not set in, even though it's not Japanese American internment, obviously the book speaks to that and, makes very specific references to that. And I wanted to make sure that I was sort of getting it right, from the point of view of someone who had actually lived through that experience. And one thing that I sort of picked up on that her daughter spoke about too a lot was how even after being released from the internment camp, there's always a feeling that part of it is with you. Like you're always kind of looking over your shoulder, like there's never a sense of being totally free. And I was thinking how that's so widely applicable to so many situations. So those were things, and I also looked a lot at photographs. Because that always kind of is, I just wanted to get a sense of what it was like to be in the camps. And I was specifically looking at Manzanar, and the book takes place, the camp that they build is really close to Manzanar, which is actually here in California. And it's one of the only camps, it's one of two, I guess, camps that still exist now that you can visit. This is actually a National Park Service camp, and you can actually visit it. So you can still see sort of like some of the barracks, and there's a small cemetery there, and some of the other things, and it can give you a sense of like the scale and like what people were going through. So it was so kind of touching at how much people try to normalize their life inside. Kids trying to have school or kids just trying to play because there's so many kids there. I mean, one of the things I found that I just thought was like so horrifying was that the U.S. government went into orphanages where there were Japanese American orphans, took the orphans out of the regular orphanages and put them inside an internment camp orphanage. Like, these are literal babies and small children who have no parents and yet are being removed from one orphanage and being put into another behind barbed wires. I mean, I just thought that was like, we are hearing this phrase so much nowadays, like the cruelty is the point. And that just made me really incensed. I mean, that is just...
Yeah, it's horrifying. I didn't know that. Yeah, and I'm curious also, did you learn, I feel like in my history books growing up in the 80s, 90s, it was just like, maybe a page or a couple paragraphs.
That's exactly, yes. When I was in high school, I remember like a paragraph or two, those giant like U.S. history textbooks that you have that are like, at World War II is one page. So there was like maybe one paragraph on Japanese American internment, but it's something that stuck with me. I guess because I was like one of the only Asian kids in my school. And so, I don't know, it was something that really stuck in my mind. So I always have thought of that. And then, it came up during the lead up to the presidential election in 2016. And I actually wrote this book before the presidential election.
You did?
Yeah, I started writing it in the end. I mean, I got the idea for it like sort of like in fall 2015.
Right.
And I usually write a short story first when a character comes to mind, and that's like what I call my treatment. So I wrote that short story at the end of 2015 and then started the book, like the proper book, like in January 2016. And then it was done before the election, the first, or maybe the second draft even.
Wow, so you had no idea how timely it would be, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really mean for it to be that way. I don't know, it was sort of, that's what I mean, I was sort of like writing into history in a way that I didn't exactly want to. And there were two things that but as I was revising, like more things happened. So then during revisions, I was like adding things to the book. And there were a couple things that I actually wrote into the book in the first draft that now have come to pass. I mean, there's small things, but I mean, in a very early scene where Layla, the main character, meets her boyfriend, David, who is Jewish, and they have to sort of meet clandestinely because of a curfew, they both receive on their phone presidential text message, like a alert from the president who is now able to text every phone. And I wrote that in like, early 2016 before the election. And then, as you all know, because you got it on your phones a few months ago, we got that, the first test run of that. And I was like, God, I wish I would have written something like Samira wins $1 million.
Right. I was going to say, your fingers on the pulse.
I know.
With,
I was like, I wish it was a different pulse.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so.
Oh, all right. Well, I write for teens, so I like to tell stories from teenage points of view. But I'm curious, why did you feel it was important to tell this book from the point of view of a teenager?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I guess there's a few things. One is I always think that teens are put into horrible positions of being forced to find their bravery and courage because of terrible decisions that adults make, and the consequences are enacted upon them. And so, Layla, she's just like a girl like all the other girls. She's going to high school. She plays on the tennis team. She has a boyfriend. She's like figuring out like where she wants to go to college. The things that a high school kid should be doing and is supposed to be doing. But instead, her childhood is, shattered because of a decision that was made about her of what, for which she has no power in that decision, nor did she do anything wrong to deserve that. And in real life, that just happens all the time. And I think so much about how, kids are just so brave, and they just, we have always we send kids to war. That's who fights our wars, and that's who leads revolutions. And, while I was writing this, like Parkland happened. And I was thinking how these kids like harness social media to build an army to like march on the streets of Washington and say like, this should not happen in one more school. And then I was thinking of, Little Miss Flint. Like literally, she started when she was like 9 or 10. I mean, because of her, Flint, Michigan's like toxic water situation is still in our, sort of, we're still aware of it, which, I mean, God, how can there be a place that doesn't have like clean water? And then, I was thinking of like Malala, like a young woman who was fighting for girls' education and for, rights of young women, and was shot. And instead of silencing her, it made her voice louder. And, the 16-year-old girl and Malala won the Nobel Prize when she was 17. And a 16-year-old girl was just nominated for the Nobel Prize, this young Swedish woman who is an environmental activist and literally has gotten millions of people marching on the streets. So, every time people will say like, oh, is this really like a thing that kids can do? I'm like, yeah, they're doing it right now. Like literally, it's not even fiction.
Yeah, and I think like, I don't know, I think back to when I was a teenager and a kid, and like there's the bravery, I think, that's there, that's just sort of not necessarily fades out as an adult, but doesn't feel as strong. Like you don't feel like I can do that the same way. You just kind of do it.
Yeah, because I think there's more fear of like there's more fear of mortality, I think.
Right.
That's like, I think that's one of the big things that come. But I also think like I love writing young adult fiction because to me it's about, young adult fiction lives in like the realm of possibility. And it's a time, where there's lots of doors, and it's about a time where doors are opening, or you're opening doors. Sometimes you have to force them open. That's what I always think is the difference between the young adult novel and the middle-aged novel. The young adult novel is about doors opening, and the middle-aged novel is about doors closing.
Totally.
And so I think that's sort of like one of the distinctions.
Yeah. Well, I loved that it was from a teen point of view. So thank you. All right. Let's see. All right. This is kind of a wacky question, but I'm a sucker for settings or, non-humans who act as characters in books. And to me, I mean, this is wild, but the dust in Internment at the camp like really served as another character. So I'm curious if this was just like, I mean, this is kind of like a nerdy craft writing question, but how did this come to you? Was it part of the research that you talked about, or did it just sort of like you read over it and realized?
So in a lot of the photographs I was looking at of Manzanar, a lot of them were like about dust. There was a lot of like, you could see like the dust storms that were coming up. And I don't know, I'm like really, my editors are always like, you're good at describing like places, or you're not really that good at describing people. And I was like, I hate people. I don't know. I don't know like why. But to me, I mean, there's a line of when they're going to the camp where she says something about how, nature is this destructive force, but it's neutral. It doesn't have bias. Like it can destroy, in any place. And I just, they're in the desert, and there's like so many, obviously there's so much symbolism with all of this. And, they see like these mountains in the distance, and like there's something like where there's these wide open expanses, and you think of that as freedom, but then they're enclosed, and like the dust is just choking them. So I did think, I'm so glad you noticed that. Thank you.
Yeah, it really came through. The whole time I was reading it, I was like, I want to take a shower.
Right?
Like, I just felt so bad.
Yes, when I was writing it too, I was like brushing my teeth like extra because it felt like my teeth were gritty.
Yeah.
I know, it's like weird how like your writing does that, but.
Well, that's a sign of a great writer.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
really.
Right.
But it really came through, and I think it was really a really powerful part of the novel for me to just, you can imagine what people are going through, and you can read about it and you can sympathize. But like that, I don't know. That was just one of the things that really stuck with me. Like, I don't want to be dirty all the time. I don't want to be dusty
I could just
all the
imagine,
time.
like in my mind, I'm imagining them like washing their hands. You know, I used to live in New York for a long time, and if you like walked around the city for a really long time, when you come home and you wash your hands, it's like gray in the basin.
Yeah.
So I sort of was like, that was a little bit of the image in my mind.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it came through. It was really powerful. Okay, one thing I really was excited to ask you about. One thing I loved in the book was the variety of Muslims who lived in the camp. So I think a lot of people hear the word Muslim and they have a very specific image in their mind.
Yeah.
So can you talk about some of the diversity of those characters?
Yeah, so I really, Islam is the most diverse religion in America. And I'm always saying everywhere, I was like, Muslim is not an ethnicity. And I feel like I have to say this literally everywhere because I'm like, there's no Muslimistan where we all come from. But a lot of people sort of think of it that way because there's just like, this is a Muslim, or I hear so much, that person doesn't look Muslim. And I'm completely baffled by this. And so in the camp, we have like a wide variety of what Muslims might look like in America. There's like Black Muslims, some of them wear hijab, some don't. There's South Asian Muslims, there's Southeast Asian Muslims, there's Latinx Muslims, there's, they talk about like what it means to be a white Muslim. So like being, for example, Turkish or Persian versus like a white Muslim. And so I think that was really important to me because that's what the religion is. It has like people from every like race and ethnicity. And so I wanted to at least, even though my main character is, South Asian Muslim, I wanted the camp to be reflective of that. Like, there's Egyptian American Muslims and I tried to like actually name like Egyptian American as opposed to saying like Middle Eastern. Just like having it be so broad, but there's specificity, obviously. And that's a different intersection, like being an Indian Muslim versus being an Egyptian Muslim. Those are two different things because you have a different cultural background, even if you're practicing the same religion. Yeah, and you probably practice it in a different way too.
Right, exactly. I just think that's really helpful. I came from, a really red state, not a lot of variety of people. And so reading a book like this as a teen would have been so eye-opening to me. And it would have been really great to know because I don't even know what I thought a Muslim person was
when I was
most
16,
Americans
haven't met a Muslim.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't. So yeah, I really appreciated that.
Glad to introduce you to someone.
Yes. Okay, I obviously and sadly do not have to ask you where you got the idea for the book, although that was like a surprise to me to hear that you started writing it before the election.
Well, it was the fall of 2015, and there were like 3 very specific things that happened during the election that sort of made me think of it.
Okay, well, tell me about that.
So one of the leading candidates in the Republican primary in September of 2015, he said, if I become president, I'm going to ban all Syrians from America because they're all ISIS, they're all terrorists, even the babies, apparently. A month later, that same individual said, if I become president, I'm going to absolutely be looking into closing mosques across America. We have to. I guess that whole constitution and freedom of religion thing, not important. And 1 month after that, the same individual said, if I become president, we are absolutely going to look into ways of establishing a database for Muslims. So all Muslim Americans will have to register on the database. And so those 3 things were, obviously it gave me like a lot of rage. I also am naturally like a person filled with rage. Because it's
like a nice rage though.
It is. I'm an Aries, so it like fits. So like the fire is like, right, the fire's always burning, and then this was just like more like logs on the fire.
Yeah.
So then it was like,
yeah. Well, I'm curious. I don't know what you thought about while writing it. Did you worry about anything in particular? Were you concerned about the similarities, the fact that it was sort of set 15 minutes into the future?
Like election night, I really was like. I got a text message from a friend, and they were like, God, who had read the book, and they were like, I really hope you're not a Cassandra. And I was like, I really hope so too. I don't know. I kind of like just, I don't know. It was really like a sense of, I don't know. I felt like I had to write the book, even though at the same time it just filled me with dread. So I think every moment, like obviously the day after the election was like probably one of the worst days of my life. And just because of the way I was feeling. And I was just like, I live in an extremely, extremely diverse neighborhood. And I think my actual neighborhood, like, it's probably like 97% like voted for Hillary. And I was like, who are the 3%? I was like, but still I was walking around and thinking like every white person I looked at, I was like, oh my God, are you the 53 or 57% or whatever that voted for somebody who said that maybe they could put me in an internment camp? Like literally, that's what I was thinking, which is like an awful way to walk around like in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
It completely strips away like your sense of just, any sense of like safety or normalcy.
Trust in humanity.
Yeah,
sort of,
or
like,
also
yeah.
that. Yeah. It just makes you suspicious of everyone you see. And that's like a weird burden to like walk around with. But I think, people of color kind of walk around with that anyway.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's kind of.
But it was just like an extra layer.
Yeah, that hasn't really gone away. I don't
No,
know.
it hasn't gone away. It just kind of gets worse.
Yeah. Well,
Especially if you're on Twitter.
oh God,
Don't go on
no. Cesspool.
there. Yeah. And those are the good days.
Right. All right, I'm gonna get into like maybe a little more upbeat questions
okay, great.
now. A little happier. What was your favorite part about writing the book? Which I know is kind of a weird question, where it is super intense.
So the
book.
dad in the book is a poet. And I as a kid, I never really imagined being a novelist as a kid. Like I never really dreamed of being an author. I mean, I started writing my first book, like the idea of like, maybe I could write a book came to me when I was like 40. I was like, maybe I should try writing a book.
Wow.
But I always loved writing poetry.
Okay.
And I did send some of my poetry that was like really kind of bad. Like I was writing a lot of like angsty high school poetry and like, about like the guy who wasn't my boyfriend or whatever. And I sort of always had a little bit of a dream of being a poet. And I was like, oh my God, now I figured out how to do it. I just have to become a novelist first. And then they have to publish your poetry in your own book. So I originally had used like poetry from another poet, Faiz Ahmed Faiz, an Urdu poet, but then it was really a giant pain in the butt to get permission. And I was like, I'm just gonna do this myself. Because like to get permission, like you had to have someone in India go to the Faiz Ahmed Faiz Foundation and like pay them the money and like, I don't know, there's like, everything in India is very involved, like the bureaucracy. And I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna write all the poetry myself. So that was actually it was something I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I liked it. And then the epigraph is.
Yes.
I looked him up. I was like, excuse me, is this like a real poet that I should know before I even started
Yeah,
reading?
so
I
I
looked him up.
did. That's like actually from him. I really wanted people to do that. So I'm so glad that you did that because I wanted people to be like, oh, who is this poet? And then it's just, yeah.
Yeah, that was a really nice touch.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna ask a silly question before I ask my last question. Per the bio on your website, you're on a lifelong quest for the perfect pastry.
Yeah.
So some of your
You
favorites?
guys, that is very excellent.
Yeah. What are some of your favorites
yeah.
that have come close, though? I'm curious, like different cities, different.
Well, Paris
pastries.
is obviously,
Yeah.
that's like the
The
one.
winner. Yeah.
Kind of hands down. So I'm lucky enough to be able to visit Paris somewhat frequently. And so pretty much when I go there, it's just like 3 pastries a day minimum. And I mean, I think it's a great way to vacation is like with a specific food theme in mind. So like everywhere I go, I'm like, what's the best pastry you got? And I will try all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
like
it's
this
really
plan.
about like the journey, not just like the destination.
Yes. I like this plan. I might have to.
Please adopt it.
I know.
Yeah.
I think I might have to. All right. What's the number one thing you want readers to take away from this book?
So, Layla is a young woman whose power has really been stripped away from her, right? And she's in this camp. And she does 2 things that I hope people will think about, which is one is she still, even though her power is taken away, she still tries to hold on to her voice. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that she can do with her voice is she seeks out allies who maybe have more power than she does. And what she basically has to convince them to do, or what she's trying to convince others to do, is like recognize the privilege they have, recognize the power that comes with it, and to use it for a purpose. Mm-hmm. And I hope that like any person of any age will think about that a little bit when they're reading this book, which is like sometimes it's uncomfortable to shine a light on yourself and like see the kind of privilege that you do have. Mm-hmm. But so much power comes with that. And I'm just like, what is the point of having that if you don't use it for a purpose that is for bettering things and lifting other people up? And so I especially hope for teens, I hope that's some way that they can take a little piece of that. And that's like part of this whole like, these hats, the read to resist hat and all that stuff. Like, just reading a book itself is not like, I've changed the world just by reading it. No, it's like the idea is, it's sort of, I think of reading as sort of like a gateway drug to resistance, right? So like reading this just builds like a little bit of empathy and like awareness and like interconnectedness. But maybe it's also like, I hope it makes people feel a little bit of rage too, and makes them think like, hey, maybe I'm going to be 18 by the next election, and maybe that means I should register to vote. And maybe that means I should get 3 of my friends to register to vote. And maybe on election day, I'm going to make sure my parents vote for the person they should. And maybe that means I'm going to read a little bit about who's actually in the election and maybe make some calls for them. Maybe that means I see something wrong, something awry, and in my community there's going to be a small protest, and maybe I go to my first one, and maybe I make my first sign at a protest, and maybe I speak at a protest, and maybe I am going to be part of the boots on the ground, like for a march on Washington, and maybe one day I'm going to be speaking at that march on Washington. Maybe I see there's like a community board position open, and maybe I'm going to run for that. Maybe it's a Senate position. Maybe it's more. So I guess I just hope that like everyone can realize that they have a power, and I hope they can use it for a purpose.
Oh, that's so great. That's such a great answer. All right, I have one more question. Don't hate me for this question before we open it up. Okay. What's next?
I actually have a book coming out, so that is like actually an easy question.
That's why I asked it, because I knew you had something.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's like good to get a softball once in a while. So in April of 2020, April-ish of 2020, is my 3rd book. It's called Mad, Bad, and Dangerous to Know. It's a little bit of a departure from my first 2 books, and it's a literary mystery, actually.
Nice. And set in Paris?
It's set in Paris, yeah. Actually,
okay.
There are pastries in there also.
I was going to say, now that I know you spent so much time there.
Was
right?
important, yeah. Yeah, exactly. I was like, all these pastries right now. Right. Thank you, Uncle Sam. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so next April, we can see that? Or 2020?
Yeah, so about a year from now, spring 2020.
Excellent. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
All right. Does anyone out here have any questions? Hi.
So I remember last year, like when you dropped the teaser for the book, I was like, oh my god, this is going to be like the book of 2018.
Okay. Oh, thanks.
I can see this being that next step. So, if they do make a movie about this, who would you want to star?
Oh my God, I know that. So first of all, the book actually has been optioned
I was
for
going
film.
to say it has, hasn't it?
Because like is this not like a perfect movie cover? I mean, just imagine a person in this. And I don't know about the actor because it's like really, it's hard to think. I mean, I'm not sure. People have asked me this so many times. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm thinking of like a South Asian young female actor, and I was like, I don't even know. We have to do a search, a talent search. That's why those things exist. Because maybe that would be, I'm sure she's out there.
Like an
so
unknown, so it doesn't end up. I love Yara Shahidi so much. Nobody ever tell her I said this.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you have the same actress playing,
yes,
like,
the same.
all the
Yeah.
same.
I mean,
YA
I hope they could find someone. I'm sure they could find somebody amazing for it.
Yeah.
And then, like, the camp director, even though he's evil, I think it should be Chris Evans, just so I can meet him.
Oh.
And, like, I think, I feel like it should be that. I was like, look, you've been Captain America for a long time. Why not play this?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's just putting it out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Okay. I think it should be like going against type. So
I think so too. I
Yeah.
never thought of that, but now that would add
Yeah.
some complexity to it.
This is going to be like a movement. You guys all tweet about it. Maybe he'll be like, oh my God, yes, that was the part for me. I've always wanted to play like a cruel dictator type.
He probably has. Yeah, let's give him the chance. Amina.
Oh, I have a question. You were talking about writing, and I felt this too, but that moment of like not trusting people like after the election, and you have to like dive into this book that's like really digging into all of the ways you can't trust people.
Yeah.
How did you protect yourself in those moments, or did you just go 100% and like let it all out? Like, how did you manage getting into that headspace and out of that headspace while you're working?
I mean, I think this goes back to that rage thing. Yeah. So I think it's good to, this is going to sound weird, but like my rage sort of gives me hope. Because I think like I can channel it, and this is like what I channeled it into. And I eat a lot of chocolate that's like another like thing. So sometimes, you need to balance like the rage with like, I was like, I'm going to have like some dark chocolate with like chili peppers in it. But I don't know. I think I do. I wrote the first draft pretty fast, and so in a way, it still felt a little distant because the election hadn't happened yet. And so I think the drafting part wasn't that. It still felt more like fiction, and it wasn't until like sort of the later revisions and like revising the author's note was actually really hard because I revised it like many times because I reference like the camps that we have at our borders, which those are internment camps. Like when you take kids and strip them from their parents' arms at like border crossings and put them like in a tent city behind like fences, that's internment. So writing into that was like a little bit hard. So the end actually was harder than the beginning. Oh, that candidate is now in power. Is now the president. Is the president, yeah. Yeah. I haven't, but maybe I should.
It's a fictional book and a fictional story that takes place in 2075, and it's the U.S.'s next civil war.
Oh, okay.
So it's quasi. I don't know. I'm assuming it seems like it totally could happen. So I'm assuming it's quasi prophetic, like.
Well, hopefully it's not prophetic.
Yeah.
Like, hopefully this isn't either. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I guess what to me is terrifying about some of these things is the more real it feels to us, the scarier it is. Like, that's why I always think, in contemporary fiction, to me is usually scarier than fantasy or science fiction because to me the scariest monsters are the ones who are real. And so I think that's kind of what I put into the book. Should we wrap up? Oh, okay. Are there, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm going to be that person who's making a statement, but if anyone's interested in going to Manzanar, my org, Vision of Love, will be taking a bus that's primarily Muslims and Japanese Americans, and then other folks are welcome as well, so you can talk to me about that. I'm sorry, I'm plugging it. My question is actually, as you were doing revisions and things were happening in real time, like, how did you decide when you're like, I can't make any more adjustments because, like, this is real in its own timeline, but, like, that's also coming true? And, like, I think specifically because you mentioned Korematsu, and then with Trump versus Hawaii, it's, like, semi-overturned, but not really. Like,
Yeah.
were you just like, I need to just let it, when did you get to that point?
I basically stopped revising when my editor was like, you can't revise anymore. I literally have an email from her which was like, you can't make any more changes. Because I had asked, can I just look at the, we call them past pages, can I just look at the next, that you guys have put together, like typeset and everything? And she was like, I will send them to you, but don't send any changes back. She's like, you can just look at them, that's all. So that was like at the point where I was like, okay, it's about to go to print. Because I made changes between what's called the ARC, like the early, the advanced reader copies, and then the final. And that was really that's like cutting it close.
I was going to say, I know when you emailed me and you were like, this change, I was like, I have a final copy.
Yeah, I know, right, exactly.
Like,
because
what
some of
changed?
the people I was in conversation with actually got like an ARC or got an
Right.
early,
Yeah.
got like a NetGalley copy, like an e-copy. And so they actually read some of the older, and then I was like, okay, you guys, here's the changes that happened. So yeah, I made some last minute changes because I was trying to.
30-page PDFs to the people in your book.
No, it wasn't like 30 pages like that. It was like just some small changes, but that were still important. But the arc of the story, nothing major like changed, but there were some like little changes that I thought were necessary. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, but then like the thing is now it's done. So now that's why I'd never reread the book.
Yeah, because you see everything you want to change.
Well, I'm afraid, there's like this, I think it's an apocryphal story of like when F. Scott Fitzgerald died and how like on his bedside table there was a published copy of The Great Gatsby and how he had like all these like corrections and notes in the margin. I was like, God, I don't want that to be me. Like, just be satisfied.
Right. Did anyone else have any more questions? Nope.
Wrap up.
Last round.
You guys, thank you so much. Oh, and also really quick, when if you're signing my book, I actually have my book. I've been taking this around as like a little souvenir. So like, if you would like sign my book anywhere you want, it's sort of like my little souvenir of my tour. So thank you so much for coming.
All right, guys. All right, so if you could.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.